Oh, all right. Sound testing. Okay, levels are good. Oh, wait. Okay, are we there? Alrighty. And the sound is good. You hear the sound, right? Mm-hmm. Alrighty. Well. Let me get ready for this. Then, oh, no! Wait, it's out of the screen? Wait, it gets cut out. No! What can we do about that? Mm. All right, let me try something. Let me try move the green screen, and let me try. No, it's not gonna work. Uh, okay, I can just do this maybe. And also the background is not great. Well, I'll put it on later. It's fine. Um, all right. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Good evening. Give me a minute. I need to get I need to get my cheat sheet of what I wanted to do here today, which is what did I want to do? Where are we? What is this? Number 37, right? Um, all right. So that's going to be here, number 37. Today's the 5th, right? Yes. All right. And then we have this. All right. I think I'm ready. Am I ready? Am I ready? No, I need a couple things here on this side. I think I need something here, and then I need, what else do I need? I see, oh, I see people sharing work in the Discord. Okay, that is ready. I need some Rhino here going on, I guess. Well, I can talk about that in a second. And yes, and I think I can. Yeah, wait, I can do that later. Okay, we can do that. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone doing? I'm very happy to be here as usual. I'm very happy to have you here as well, as usual. For those of you who might be new to this live stream, my name is Jose Luis. This is Parametric Camp. We do a lot of computational design tutorials, exercises, workshops, and I teach a lot of techniques on how to write code, how to use technology for creative purposes. We do these live streams where I use them to record material and then edit it, cut it, and then put it online while I'm hanging out with a lot of friends such as Dusko, Andres, Rodolfo, Monique, Natick, people that I'm very happy that I see very often here in the live stream. Hi guys, how is it going? And what are we doing today? Today we are doing. Let me pull up a browser here. Today we're going to do two very cool things. Today is going to be a sort of a Christmas theme live stream, kind of. It doesn't really. It's going to be a Christmas theme live stream because I think this is the last live stream that I'm going to do this month. Because then I'm going to be busy with other things and I'm going to be traveling a little bit. So I don't think I will be able to do live streams like this. So today is going to be the last live stream with recording of tutorials, etc., like we typically do. I think it's going to be the last one until January. I think next week I will do something where I think I will do something. Remember how last week we were talking about just having like a Zoom call where we all just jump in and have a conversation, all the community together? I think we could do that next week. So I'm thinking about that. If you're interested in staying up to date, just go to the Discord and make sure you join the community there. But today we're going to do two algorithmic modeling challenges. One of them is going to be and they're going to be slightly Christmas theme. One of them is going to be the Koch snowflake, or the Koch start, or the Koch island, or however you want to call it. It's basically a fractal shape that starts with a triangle and then is generated by subdividing each one of the sides of that triangle into further triangles ad infinitum. Like you could do this infinitely, all right? And apparently I was looking at the Wikipedia page yesterday, and apparently it's one of the first fractal, it's a fractal curve, and it's one of the first fractals that was documented like very early in the 20th century. So we're going to do this because it's cool and it's pretty easy to do actually. And we're also going to try the Koch anti-snowflake. It's also very easy to do. And the other thing that we're going to do a Sierpinski triangle, all right? And because it looks like a Christmas tree. That's it. That's why this whole thing is Christmas theme. And this is also super interesting because it's basically just taking one triangle and subdividing it in three triangles and doing that recursively over and over again. So I think these two exercises are really interesting because they're very related. They both tap on the idea of fractalness and infinite recursion. We're not going to make it infinite. We're going to make it finite, just because computers have a finite resources. But I don't know. They're kind of cool and they're very simple to do actually. So I think I want to try doing them. All right. And but before we go any further, I would like to remind those who might be new to this channel that we have a Discord, which is where we post, and I just posted the link on the chat, which is where we have conversations offline during the week, etc. And it is where I will post instructions about this Zoom call, this parametric camp community Zoom call that we're going to have next week, next Saturday, and how that works. So if you want to join, make sure you join the Discord and that you check some of the channels that we have up there. And also, if you want to stay up to date about when do we do live streams, just go here and you can follow Parametric Cam on social media. We post announcements when we go live, but we also have a Google Calendar where I post events about when we're going to be streaming. So you can add this to your Google Calendar, and again, you can, when events show up, we're going to be streaming. Okay. And also, as usual, if you like what you see, please feel free to subscribe to the channel, like these videos, tell it to your friends, etc., and all those nice things. Okay. I think I planned for today a double live stream, but I'm not sure that this is going to take us all day, because these exercises are actually they're not that difficult once you break down the rules of how things work. So I'm thinking we may just do like a longer, like a 2-hour, maybe 2.5 hours in the morning. We get everything done, and then I get to do some personal stuff in the afternoon, which I have a lot of errands to run actually. All right. So we can do social and Q&A, etc. by the end of the video today, by the end of this video. All right. And I'm going to I forgot, I'm going to do the Koch snowflake and the Sierpinski triangle. I'm going to do them both in vanilla Grasshopper first, and then I'm going to do that same thing implemented in C# within Grasshopper. Okay. For those of you who might be more vanilla Grasshopper oriented at this point, or for those of you who are making the jump and are now transitioning to writing your geometry algorithms with pure code, which is a lot of what we do in this channel. Also, for those of you who might be new, we just finished Oh, can I show this? I think I want to show this. I'm so happy about this. Um, we just finished a new series. It's called Learning C Sharp Introduction to Computer Programming for Designers. It's basically a full playlist that is all about learning how to write computer programs using the C Sharp programming language. And it's got everything, variables, for loops, classes, functions, etc. It's complete. We just wrapped it up last week. I'm super happy about this. I'm so going to use this as teaching material in my real world teaching, and I'm so going to recommend for all of you who want to learn how to code. And I would like to, very soon, I will start using this as the base for new playlists where now that we know C Sharp, we start like, okay, let's send, how do you write C Sharp in Grasshopper? How do you write C Sharp in Unity? How do you write C Sharp in other creative design environments? So we're going to be doing, so you're welcome to check that out. If you want to learn C Sharp, that is a really good resource. Not that I made it. I just think it's a good one. Well, actually, I think it's a good one because I made it, obviously. But you may disagree with that, and I'm always open to feedback. If you think there's something that could be improved, why not? Let's just change it and make it better, right? All right. Oh, and I see that I see that Dan Schiffman is streaming right now. Oh my God, why do I do this the same? Why do I do this always? I overlap with Dan. This is not great. Sorry, I apologize. I have my fall semester is really, really busy with teaching. So I started doing these live streams on Fridays, and that worked really great. But when September came, I had to move to Saturdays because I had to teach every single day of the week. So, but hopefully in January we will move back to Fridays. That would be great, actually. So, any questions, comments, suggestions before we start? Hi, Sujay. Good morning, or good evening, whatever you are. I don't know. Any comments, suggestions? Well, before we start. All right. So in the meantime, maybe if you want to post something, I'm going to start preparing here. What do I have to prepare for this? Oh, we need to do sketches. And where is my drawing pen here? And can you see? So if I draw a sketch here, yes, okay, this is working. Yeah, it wasn't working the other day and I just panicked. No. Yes, it wasn't working the other day. I panicked big time. All right, so the Koch snowflake. So let's start with this video. And let me focus. Where are the? Wait. And where are the layers? Sorry, I'm trying to find the layer. Okay. All right. Are you excited about this? Okay. So we're going to do the Koch snowflake. We are going to do it both in Grasshopper and C Sharp. I will record the introduction at the very end. Please remind me to record the introduction. I typically forget. That's not good. And you know what? I'm also going to change my tiny me. Yeah. I think I want to change it to the left, right? Because this is what I change it here. Why did I change myself to this side? I did it because I was writing the C Sharp thingies and the code was always on the left hand side. So I think I want to change that. Let me change that right now. Okay. Where is the transformation? Do we like it here? Yeah, why not, right? And then this one should also move to the same spot. Yes, so now I'm here smaller, and then I'm here in the same place. All right. I think this is better. Yeah. Okay. So okay. So I need to record the introduction. So am I going to do, what do you like better? Do you like better when I do one video that is both Grasshopper and C#? Or do you like it better when the video is split in two and there's one video? So geometry algorithm 6.1, and that's Grasshopper, and 6.2, another video is C#. What is better at this point? I've been splitting it, especially for the ones that were super long. I wonder if that it makes things difficult because I have to double on the introduction. I don't know. I'm going to... What do you think? Should I do 2 videos or 1 video? I think I like keeping it in 2 videos and just like referring one back to the other. All right. I think I'm going to do 2 videos. 2 shorter videos. I like shorter videos, I think. I don't know why. Yeah. All right, so we have conflicting opinions. Okay, I think I'm gonna do separate, just because I like shorter videos and because we've been doing that before. So I'm going to continue a little bit of like that. And I can always, in the introduction of the second one, I can point to the previous one for the ideas and for some of the concepts. Yeah, because otherwise, when people see like, oh, it's like a 2.5 hour video, oh my God, but then it's actually 2 videos, you can get to choose one or the other. I'm gonna keep it 2 videos. Yes, I'm gonna keep it 2 videos. All right, so I'm going to do the introduction later. So I'm going to start by talking about the Koch snowflake, what it is, and then we are going to do some sketching, and then I'm going to move to Grasshopper and start implementing it. That's the plan. Okay. Okay, so what we're doing today is going to be the Koch snowflake, or as it has like many other names, the Koch curve, the Koch star. Even I just found out that it's called the Koch island. I don't even know why that's. I like calling it the Koch star. That's my preference. And it turns out that what we're doing today is basically a fractal shape. Fractals are shapes or geometry or curves that are basically done by taking the elements of a curve and subdividing it into smaller elements that contain somehow the notion of the larger shape that they are coming from, more or less. All right, but the interesting idea about fractals is that you can keep doing this process over and over again, almost infinitely, and that subdivision that you start getting creates more complexity in the shape that you are working with. So the Koch star was one of the earliest fractals that was documented and was discovered in a way. I think it was discovered by Helge von Koch. I'm not sure who this gentleman was earlier in the 20th century. But what's interesting is that basically what the idea is that you start with a triangle and then you subdivide each one of the sides of the triangle and you generate like this tiny attached triangle to it. And if you keep doing that for every new smaller side of this shape that you start getting, more triangles, etc., then you start this continuous subdivision of the segments of this polyline into smaller triangulations, creates this complex form that starts getting more and more definition and more tiny segments all around. And it's interesting because if you do an infinite Koch curve, then basically you can start zooming, and you get a periodic pattern that starts arising because the geometry is basically the same. It's just subdivided at smaller scales. If we were to do this infinitely, right? We're not going to do it infinitely here because we have limited resources, but I will show you how to create these subdivisions with a controlled amount of levels of subdivision. All right. And something that we're going to do is also we're going to create the Koch anti-snowflake, which is basically instead of subdividing the triangulation and creating the triangles popping out, then you can create them popping in, and then it creates this interesting shape that I don't know, it can be. But moreover, what I would like to also showcase is that we are going to be working with a triangle, but in fact the algorithm just works exactly the same. It doesn't have to be a triangle, it works exactly the same with any polyline whatsoever, because at the end of the day what we're doing is we're taking a polyline, in this case a triangle, but it could be anything, and to each segment we are subdividing it with this triangular form. So we could just apply that logic to any single polyline that we could think of and start getting this Koch subdivision logic on this shape. Okay, so we're going to do that, but as usual, before we actually start doing it, let's do some sketching and let's think about which process we're going to follow to generate this shape, and then we start getting hands-on. Alrighty, so it's time for sketching. so let's do it. So I'm going to start with, what are we going to start? We're going to start with a triangle. All right, it's going to be a really shitty triangle, as I usually do, because I have to draw on top of this thing. That is a really bad triangle, oh my god. Okay, can I do just a polyline like this? Okay, so what if I do this and this and this? Yeah. Oh. Wait. Is there any way I can do this better? I have to find a way to make this, to streamline this. All right, so this and this and this and this. Okay, that's a little better. Okay, I like that. So now let's say we have to. Now, what I want to say is that we basically have vertices. We're working with vertices, and therefore this is going to be vertex 1, 0, vertex 1, vertex 2, and then vertex 3 because it doubles down. It's a closed shape. And then the next thing that we need to do is going to be, well, for each one of the segments of the polyline, we need to subdivide it into at thirds. Okay, so we need to find those points. And then the next thing that we need to do is we need to say, all right, we need to find the center points. I'm going to use different colors for that. We need to find the center of the, we need to find the center, and then we need to create a point that is offset from that center a control amount. That control amount, so that would be the next point. That control amount is going to be, I'm going to draw it as a sketch somewhere here to the right. So I'm going to draw a sketch. That sketch is going to be something like this. All right. And if this is A, oops. And if this is A, I'm going to move this somewhere here. And if this is A, then it turns out that this is H, and it turns out that H is going to be equal to A square root of 3 divided by 2. And then once we have that, then we can go back and say, all right, we have created this and now we can just join those points, all of them, in the right order. How can I get a thicker? All right, there you go. So I can get the size of this, all right, and then wait. Nice. Okay, and then we start over again. Hey, Randa! How are you doing? So good to see you. How's life? A is the dimension. No, it's not the dimension of the big triangle. It's the dimension of this segment here. Oh, sorry. Nope. No. Come back. No, it's the dimension of. Wait. No. What am I doing? It's the dimension of. I really need to learn how to use this program at some point. Is this dimension here? Okay, I will explain that over the video. Okay, and then I may also want to explain. That if we have a segment, if we have 2 points, we can create a vector between them, which is this one. But at the same time, we can also create another vector, which is going to be the perpendicular vector. All right. I'm going to go here. I'm going to draw like a triangle. And I'm going to draw a very faint triangle like this, and then once I have that, then I can say, well, if I do the cross product of these two, then the resulting is going to be this vector, which is basically the same as the resulting is going to be the same as this vector here, which at the end of the day is also the same as this one here, which is what I want. I will explain that as I talk about the algorithm. Yeah. All right. So now I think we are ready to explain this thing. So I'm going to deactivate all the layers, and I'm going to tell the story. Okay. How's everyone holding on? Am I recording? Yes, I am recording. Should I be? White background looks much better for this. Oh, look, it's because this is green, right? It messes with the chroma. All right, I'll do that. I'll do that by the end. Anyway, I'll do that by the end of the video. So you see, I get distracted again. Let's get going. Okay, so let's start by the beginning. We have a triangle, but again, everything that I'm going to say applies to any polyline in general. We have a triangle, which is composed of 3 lines, but at the end of the day, we don't really care about lines. You've heard me say this a lot. This triangle, if we think of it in a more abstract way from a polyline perspective, is just basically a sequence of points, a sequence of order points, one after the other. So we can think about this triangle as 4 points, so point 0, 1, 2, and then point 3 again, which is on top of point 0, which is the one that closes the polyline on top of itself. We can think of this polyline as 4 points, a sequence of 4 points. And therefore, what we're going to do is, for each pair of these 2 points, 0 and 1, 1 and 2, and 2 and 3, we're going to apply a subdivision algorithm to find this triangulation. All right? The idea is that we're going to create one algorithm that is going to take 2 points and is going to create all the points that are necessary to create the triangular subdivision. And then we're going to apply that algorithm to all the segments of this polyline. And what is that algorithm going to look like? Well, basically, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to subdivide each one of those segments into thirds. So we're going to subdivide it into thirds, and we get 2 points that are at 1/3 and 2/3 of the length of that segment. And then after that, we need to find the point that is here, the point that is at the tip of this triangle. The way we're going to do that is we're going to find the point in one of those segments that is at the center, so at 0.5 relative to the length. And then we're going to move that point perpendicularly to that line a control amount. So we're going to move it outwards, or when we do the anti-snowflake, we're going to move it inwards, and we're going to move it perpendicularly. All right? How much are we going to move it perpendicularly? Well, it turns out that so that the point shows up there. How much? Well, it turns out that because these are equilateral triangles, they have the same side, there are very controlled rules about how equilateral triangles work. And the idea is that if I have a triangle that has the size of A, its height is actually equal to the size of the triangle, the side of the triangle, times the square root of 3 divided by 2. And this can actually be very simply found out if we think that this angle here. Where am I here? If we think that this angle here is an angle of 60 degrees because it's an equilateral triangle, and therefore this is the sine of that angle, and the sine of 60 degrees is square root of 3 divided by 2. Okay, you can Google this. It's very simple. It's very simple to find. All right. So as we move that, then we can create now the polyline that goes around all those points by just in order taking the first point, then the second point, then the point in the middle that we just moved, the third point, and then the first point on the second segment, all those points one in sequence. So we will do an exercise where we will have to be very careful about the order in which we join all these points together. Now, I have skipped a little bit over the idea of this perpendicularity. This perpendicularity will be something that we will need to work on, because we will need to find what to this segment and to this segment and to this one, what is a vector that is perpendicular to that line. And how do we do that? Well, imagine we have this triangle in 3-dimensional space, and we're going to assume that is planar. Okay? For these calculations, we're going to assume that is all the points, all of the polyline are in the same plane. If they weren't, I will show what would happen. But we're going to assume that they're all in the same plane. So if they're on the same plane, we can assume that there is one vector that is perpendicular to that plane. So what we can do is, for each one of these segments, right, for each one of these pairs of points, we can find the main axis vector, which is the vector that joins this point with the other point. That is the main axis. And we also have the global perpendicular vector to the whole polyline. It's a vector that is pointing outwards from the plane in which all those points are connected. If we have those two vectors, it turns out that if we do the cross product of those two vectors, remember, the cross product of two vectors is a vector that is perpendicular to to the two vectors, and it has a length that is equal to the area of the parallelogram. It doesn't matter in this case, right? So it turns out that if we find the cross product of these two vectors, we get a perpendicular vector to those two. And in this case, that is exactly the vector that we need to use to move the point at the center of the segment outwards. We will need to find a unit vector in that direction and then scale that vector up by the height of that particular triangle. Okay, but we can do that for each segment independently because we can control, we know the length of the segment and we know the length of a third of that segment. So that's going to be very easy to do. Now, as I said, in this video, we're going to implement all this logic using vanilla plain Grasshopper with no scripting whatsoever. And then in the next video that comes afterwards, we're going to implement all these logics using C# scripting within Grasshopper. But the techniques and the logics that I just explained apply to any computational design environment that you can think of. All right, so I think it's time to get busy. Let's go and start writing and start implementing this. All right, it's going to be super fun. Alrighty, I think we're ready to start cranking. Okay, so what am I going to do? What I'm going to do? We're going to do the Grasshopper way, and I'm just going to create a triangle at center at 0, 0, and then I'm going to bring it into Grasshopper, and then we will start playing with it. All right. Actually, let me just. What do I have here? Alrighty. I see. Okay, and then here. All right. Okay, so I think I want to go fast on this one because I'm more interested in the C# scripting one. Okay. All right, let's do it. All right, so let's start. The first thing, we're going to go to Rhino and we're going to create a triangle. So I'm going to hit here on Polygon. I'm going to set the number of sides to be 3. And then I'm just going to tap 0 so that we go to the center. And then I'm going to create a triangle that is going to be whatever side. I don't really care. And I'm going to press F7 to just remove the grid so that I see this clean triangle on my screen. I'm going to bring the triangle as a curve into Grasshopper. So I'm going to add a curve object, select one curve. I'm going to choose this one here. And then I can see that if I drop a panel, that I have this reference polyline curve, etc., etc. Okay. All right. So what is the first thing that we're going to do? As per our algorithm, I think the first thing we want to do is we want to subdivide. We want to find what these points are. So the points at 2/3, at 1/3 and 2/3, we're going to try to find those. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here to curve, subdivide, and I'm going to explode this curve. So I think I'm just going to double click and say explode. All right. This component is going to take this polyline and it's going to explode it into the 3 segments that are line-like objects, all right? And it's also going to give us the 4 vertices of the polyline. And this is very interesting because, as I said, we have the first one, second one, third, and the fourth one is a duplicate of the first one because the polyline is being closed on top of itself. All right, as we have that, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take each one of the 3 segments that are subdivided and find points at 1/3 and 2/3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to subdivide this curve into a control amount of points. And for this one, I'm going to use a panel because if I were to use a slider, I don't like using sliders for things that cannot change or should not change. Because if somebody, instead of 3, were to put 5 or 7 or whatever here, they would basically break the algorithm. The algorithm would not work as it is supposed to do, right? So I don't really like that. So now I have here, for each one of the curves, I have the 4 points that are the subdivisions at 0, 1/3, 2/3, and 3/3. All right, so we're at a good spot. Another thing that I want to do is I want to find the point here in the middle so that I move it outwards. So I can do that by, for example, evaluating the length. So I'm going to evaluate a curve, right? And evaluating means finding a point, finding all the properties of that curve at a particular parameter. Remember that the parameter is this relative length, not exactly, but it's like this relative length along the curve that we can use to query properties of that curve. So I'm going to query the curve at 0.5 because I want the center of the curve. And you're going to notice that the point that I get is somewhere very, very here at the beginning. If these were pure lines, I would get a point at the center because pure lines have a domain for the parameter that goes from 0 to 1. But because these are not pure curves, these are actually line-like curves, which is a little confusing, I know. It turns out that their domain can be whatever. So I'm just going to say, for example, let me see what is the domain of these curves. And you can see that the domain is from 0 to 22. I don't even know what that means. So something that we can do is we can reparameterize these curves. Can I do that here outside? Yes. So we can reparameterize them here so that their domain becomes from 0 to 1, and therefore I know that a point at parameter 0.5 is at the center. Okay? I don't like changing the outputs. I'd rather do changing the inputs, so I'd rather reparameterize here. That's why I did it here just so that you could see it, but I'd rather reparameterize where you need the reparameterized information, because if I do it here, then any other cable that I would plug into any other thing would have to be reparameterized, and maybe I don't want that. And then if I need to change this back to normal, then I mess with the rest of the definition. So I'd rather mess with inputs than with outputs in this sense. I don't know if that was clear. Anyway, so now I have the points here, I have the points here, and the next thing that I want to do is I want to find the perpendicular vector to each one of these segments so that I can use that vector to move this point a controlled amount. How is that going to work? Well, first of all, what I would need to do is I would need to find the vector that goes from the starting point to the end point of each curve. I could do that by messing a little bit with the lists here with the 4 points, and then just creating 2 lists, one that is the starting points and another one that is the end points. But since I already have the segments here, maybe perhaps an easier way to do this is to find the endpoints of each one of these. So for example, I'm going to say here endpoints. I'm going to plug in here the curve, and then you see that I have a list of starting points and a list of endpoints. So if I now create a vector between 2 points, with the starting point being the starting point and B being the end point, now you can see that I have these vectors that are pointing from the start to the end, which is very difficult to see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here to vector display, and I'm going to show these vectors anchoring them in the beginning at the start point. I'm doing this, remember, because vectors can have any location in three-dimensional space. So we need to give it an artificial anchor, an artificial starting point for the preview of these vectors. All right? All right, great. So we see now that we have three vectors, each one along the axis of the lines. The next thing that I need is, remember, I need a perpendicular vector, a vector that is perpendicular to this plane, so that I can do the cross product operation. How can I do that? Well, I know that this polyline is right now flat and planar in the xy plane. So I could just simply here just add the c vector, an unit c vector, and that would work fine. However, because I want to do things a bit more programmatically and smartly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to fit a plane through all the points of this polyline. So I think I can do that by saying plane fit. All right. So and then I'm going to give it a bunch of points. So those are going to be all the vertices of the polyline, and you can see that I get a plane that is at the center and is flat. So that's great. And then from this plane, I'm going to deconstruct it so that I can get the normal vector. So this plane, I'm going to deconstruct it, and then you can see that I get a normal vector. And if I render that vector for each one of these axes, you can see that I get this vector that is pointing down. All right. Okay, great. So at this point, I think we are ready to take these vectors, the vectors that we created for each one of the segments, and then do the cross product between these two vectors and the vector that is perpendicular. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, I'm going to find the cross product between two vectors. But remember, the cross product of two vectors is a non-commutative operation, and the order matters. And it's driven by the right-hand rule. So if I multiply this one first by this one, and if we do the right-hand rule, turns out that you can't see it because it's mirror, but it turns out that the vector, if you hold it like this from the first one to the second one, your thumb is pointing in the direction that this vector will take. So it's important that we make sure that when we do this, the first vector that we multiply is going to be the axis that we are working with, so these vectors, and the second one is going to be the perpendicular one. All right. With this, we get a bunch of vectors. You see, we get a bunch of vectors that are perpendicular. All right. So this vector is perpendicular to this one. This vector is perpendicular to this one, and this vector is perpendicular to this one. But these vectors are huge, and we actually need normal vectors. We can actually we can actually plot them in the middle points instead, so that it's a bit clearer. You see, this one is pointing there, where this one is pointing there, and this pointing is pointing there. So that's great. Okay, with a couple of caveats. One is the fact that these vectors are huge, and we need them to be unitized. So the problem was that these vectors, the axis vectors had whatever length, and I need those vectors to be one unit, so that when I multiply those vectors with one unit with this other vector that was also unit, I get unit vectors as a result. These vectors that I'm getting, these are not unit vectors. So the only thing that I need to do is I need to unitize these vectors. I need to unitize these vectors before plugging them in. So I need to unitize these vectors before I do the operation, and then now I get nice unit vectors to move my points. Okay? So that's one thing. The other thing is that you may be noticing that these vectors are pointing inwards, right? And that is because if you remember, it turns out that when I was calculating the perpendicular vector to the polyline, because of the order of the triangles, this order, it turns out that the fit plane ended up giving me a vector that was in the negative c direction. And because the order matters a lot when I do the cross product, and it's driven by the right-hand rule, it turns out that As opposed to my diagram where C was pointing up, in this one it's pointing down, and therefore the perpendicular vector is pointing inwards. So there's two ways I can go about that. Either I flip this vector, or either I flip the curve before I work with this. So I can, for example, just flip the curve before I feed it into this thing. All right, which is not working. So maybe that is not what we need to do. And or I just hardwire here that instead of just calculating it from the plane, I'm just going to just feed it manually a positive. I'm just going to feed it manually vectors that are in the right direction. So I'm just going to hard code here a C vector. And I'm going to keep this because I actually want to play with this in the future as a parameter. So, so yeah. So now we finally have these perpendicular vectors. We do have the perpendicular vectors. They are unit, which is great because now what I can do is I can scale them up by a control amount, the amount that we just have discussed. The fact that the height must be square root of 3 divided by 2 times the side of this small triangle. So the side of each one of these smaller segments. Okay, so let's take these vectors, the cross products, and for each one of them, we're going to multiply this vector. We're going to multiply it for the right length. The right length is going to be, what we're going to do is we're going to take each one, as per the diagram, we're going to take each one of these longer, we're going to take each one of the longer sides of the triangle. We're going to divide that length by 3 so that we get this length. And then once we have that divided by 3, then that smaller length, which is going to be A, is what we're going to multiply by square root of 3 divided by 2. All right? Oops. Therefore, what we're going to do is for each one of the segments, we're going to calculate the length. And I forgot, I'm sorry about this, I forgot to drop here some bifocals so that those of you who are not icon people can have a better grasp. So we're going to find the length of each one of these curves. Okay? And given that length, I'm going to now divide that by 3 and multiply by square root of 3 divided by 2. I would do that with regular Grasshopper components, but I actually, because it's a lot of typing, I like the expression component better because it just lets me write here as one expression the fact that I want to take whatever is coming into this component and I want to divide it by 3, and look how I am typing 0.0 to make sure that I'm not engaging into integer division. I want an actual I want precision, I want decimals, all right? And then I'm going to multiply the result of this by the square root of 3. How do I do the square root? If you go here to the functions, you can see there is a breakdown of all the mathematical functions that the expression component allows us to use. If you go here, you can see that there is a square root, SQRT. So it turns out that I can just type here SQRT of whatever, so this is going to be the value of 3, and then divide this by 2. And again, I'm going to type here 0.0 to make sure that I have decimal precision. Now, I want to point out something. I have used here parentheses, and this is absolutely unnecessary because this operation could have done exactly the same without parentheses. I'm just doing this for the sake of visual clarity to explain the concept of like, this is the length, this is a third of the length, and then that is what we're multiplying by blah, blah, blah. But it's actually unnecessary because of the order of the operands that we're working with. All right, so we have this for each one of the length, and you can see that the 3 of them are the same because it's an equilateral triangle, so that's great. And now what we're going to do now is we're just going to multiply these unit vectors, the perpendicular unit vectors, by these values. So I'm just going to multiply these vectors by and I get longer vectors, which if I represent here, you can see that the vector, can we take a look? Oh, it kind of looks like this forms a perfect equilateral triangle, right? So great. So now we can just take those middle points and then just move them with, I'm going to take the middle points and I'm going to move them with these vectors that I just created. All right. And I think I'm good. I have everything that I need now. I have the points, the subdivided points. I have the points in the middle. And now everything that I need to do is just going to be about taking all those points and make sure that I combine them and mix them in a way that is perfectly ordered. All right, because remember, for the polyline to work, I need to go from here, here, and then this one in the middle, and then this one and this one, etc., etc. So that is going to take a little bit of like list manipulation inside of Grasshopper. So let's take a look at how we could do that. All right. How did that go? Was it clear or was it too fast? Or could you follow? I'm honestly not that great at doing vanilla Grasshopper these days lately. I don't know why. I guess because I'm thinking more in coding terms than in these kind of terms. So, yeah. All right. So now I'm thinking, do we have like some kind of remove duplicates? Remove duplicate points. Yeah, that's not what I want to use. Okay. So I guess we could just take these points. This is not very clean. I guess we could just take these points and just insert this point in the middle of the list. And then just get it over with. And then just clean duplicates. So let me try that before. So that we will need to graph this. We will get this, and then we just combine them, right? We just combine these points here. Oh no, we insert items on these lists. We insert these items in position number 2, right? And then we get this here, which kind of sounds like if we flatten them, if we flatten this, then and we just get like a curve, sorry, a polyline. Where's polyline? Here. Yes, so we get that. And do we get zero length segment was collapsed to create value? Yeah, because we have redundant points. This is not very clean, but honestly, I don't want to get into the weeds of like serious Grasshopper item manipulation. So I think I'm going to go for this approach. Yes, I'm probably going to go for this approach. Okay. All right, let's take a look. Here in this component, what we have is if we plug a panel, and this is super, super useful anytime you're doing data manipulation in Grasshopper. Panels are your friends and you need to keep them handy to see what's going on. In this panel, we have 3 branches where each branch contains 4 points. And each one of those 4 points are going to be the starting point, 1/3, 2/3, and the last one of one segment. and then the same for the second segment, and the same for the third segment. And you can see that this actually makes sense because this last point of the first segment is the same one as the first point of the second segment, and the last point of the second segment is the same as the first point of the third segment, and this one is the same as this one. So it kind of makes sense, all right? So the only thing that we need to do in order to get all these points plus the point, the one that is pointing out, to get it right, the only thing that we need to do is for each one of these three lists, in the middle, here at the center, we need to insert this new point that we have created, which we have created just right now, okay? So we have here a list with the 3 points that we just generated. The problem is that, so we're going to do that with with insert item. Where is that? We're going to do that with insert items. So here, what we're going to do is the insert item component is asking us for the list where we want to insert items, all right? And then it's asking us for the elements that we want to insert, so these ones, and it's asking us for the location. So that's going to be, I want the new elements to show up in position number 2. So I'm going to hardwire here a number 2, all right? And this is probably not going to work, all right? It's not going to work because it's going to give us something very strange, which is the fact that all these points have been inserted here in a really weird way. The whole list of points, so -11, 0, and 11, has been inserted, the whole list has been inserted in the middle, -11, 0, and 11, for each one of the 3 lists, which is not what we want, because actually, let me show you, if we were to create a polyline now over all those flattened points, if I were to create it without the flattened points, I would get something very strange. And if I were to create it over the flattened points, I would have the same strange thing. So this is not going to work. It's not going to work because it turns out that the structure of the data that is coming out of the divide curve, so you see these 3 branches with the 3 paths, is very different from the structure that is coming out from moving these points outwards outside of the triangle, where we have the 3 points in one list and the branch has a different name. Because we want each one of these points to go in the middle of each one of these branches, what we need to do is we need to change the structure of this data so that we have 1 point for each one of the 3 branches that we have here. And so that if the data matches in structure, then each one of the points will be inserted in each one of the branches differently. The way to do that is going to be super simple. We're just going to graft the data that is coming from this component. And if you remember, grafting is an operation that basically adds 1 branch to the tree for each one of the items that you have in the tree. So this is what we had before, and this is what we have now. We have each one of the elements on its own branch with a different, and every element in a different branch. And if we see, you can see that the structure of these 2 things, the original and the data that we want to insert, they now match identically. So when we put them together here in this, then the matching is going to be identical. And we're going to get 1 point here at the center, the other point here at the center, and the other point here at the center. And that is going to be great because now, if I create polylines, you can see that each one of the polylines, right, each one of the 3 polylines is in the order that we were expecting. All right? I'm going to flatten this because instead of getting 3 polylines, what I want is 1 continuous polyline across all the points, okay? So which is what I'm getting right now. And you can see that I'm getting a tiny error here that says 0 length element was collapsed, blah, blah, blah. This is because, if you remember, here in this list, we are duplicating points. We have this point that is the same as this one, this point that is the same as this one. So therefore, because we're duplicating, there's like 0 length segments, which the component is complaining about. So what we've done is not very, very clean, but it has saved us a lot of data manipulation to make this operation cleaner. So at this point, I'm not entirely I'm not entirely unhappy with this. We just got the job done for this one. So I think that's fine. And you can see that now we have basically completed a full routine here. And I'm going to just add here a tiny bucket here. And I'm going to deactivate everything, the visualization of everything, because I don't want anything in the middle. Yes, so for this starting curve that we have here, and we can see this a bit clearly if I create a boundary surface, for example, for this original polyline, what we now have created is this other polyline that has this subdivision. Okay. Alrighty, so I'm going to take all of this and I'm just going to wrap it inside. I'm just going to wrap it inside a group. Okay, and this part here is the algorithm that takes a polyline and gives me as a result another polyline that has been subdivided with the Koch subdivision algorithm. All right. Okay, so we are almost there, except for the fact that we now want to apply this logic, this subdivision algorithm, recursively. We want to take this polyline and apply it over and over and over again as many times as possible. How would we do that in Grasshopper? Well, turns out, bad news, in vanilla Grasshopper, there's not really a way of doing this, because of the way Grasshopper works is that it won't let you take the output of an algorithm, which is the subdivided curve, and then plug it in again as an input. You see, it gives me an error because there is a recursive data stream found. Okay, Grasshopper doesn't let you plug outputs into inputs that lead to the same output, because it would create a cyclical reference and it doesn't let you work like that. There are plugins and there are ways to bypass this, but I find them a little artificial and a little against the spirit of Grasshopper. So literally, at this point, the only real way that you can do that in Grasshopper is by taking this whole thing, the algorithm that subdivides into and then just plugging the output into the input again, and then just doing it again, and then the resulting curve, just plugging it again at the beginning and giving it a third iteration, and now taking this and oops, I don't know what I'm doing anymore, and then taking this and copy pasting it and giving it a fourth iteration, which is not terrible, but it's definitely not clean and not great, you see. And let's do like a fifth one, for example. I'm going to take the whole thing and I'm just going to copy paste it here, and we have the result. And let me do a boundary surface here. All right, and we get this result. Okay. So obviously this is not great because it involves copy pasting a big chunk of Grasshopper components, and also it doesn't give me a slider that I can use to decide. I want 4 levels, 5 levels, 6 levels of subdivision. You will need to manually copy paste these 4, 5, 6 different times, which is obviously not great. Again, I know that there are plugins out there that would let you do this in a programmatic way. I'm not interested at this point in talking about those right now, because what I want is actually to show you how this would work and how we would be able to control this recursive iteration if we were to actually write this using C# scripting. Okay, so so this is the result that we got. I just want to real quick do an exercise, which is, remember when we decided that the vector should be the unit C vector? All right, so something that we can do is we can decide to not use this vector in one direction, but use it in the negative direction. So for example, if I plug in here a -1 value, let's say that we plug in here, let's say that we plug in here the -1 value, and we're going to apply that to, let's say that we change this vector, and the vector that we use here is whatever we pass. All right, so we're going to take that away from the algorithm, and we're going to do the same operation over again. We're just going to plug in here a bunch of times. I'm just going to copy paste this. Just going to copy paste this like a couple times, like 4 times, for example. All right. And let's say that now we have this one vector that is the one that we're using to drive all the generation. Right now, because z is positive, the perpendicular vectors point outwards. But if we were to change this to negative, for example, the whole thing will point inwards. And can I get a boundary? Can I get a boundary surface here? Yes. The whole thing will point inwards, and therefore creating this Koch snowflake of sorts, right? Or we can just bring it back to positive and just keep it like that. All right. So that perpendicularity is the one that drives which direction we're generating the C. We're generating the triangle on, and then it can lead us to interesting geometry. And honestly, you could implement something where every cycle of the iteration, you randomly choose whether if the z vector is positive or negative, and therefore whether if the subdivision goes outwards or inwards. And that would create some interesting variations of this Koch snowflake. The last thing that I want to talk about is the fact that we have decided to start off from a triangle, and therefore we end up getting this really nice triangular snowflake of sorts. But everything that we have done for this algorithm, there's nothing that necessarily depends on the fact that this geometry that we started with has to be a perfect triangle. Not at all. In fact, if we were to say, well, instead of a perfect triangle, why do I not start off from a polyline of any shape? So I'm going to create here some kind of weird polyline, for example, and I'm going to use that as the one that is going to be fed into the algorithm. By doing that, you can see that now, and if I close this, you can see that now what I have generated is the same subdivision pattern, but over each one of the sides of the polyline. And therefore, I can apply Koch subdivision basically to any polyline that I can think of. And in fact, it doesn't even need this, this algorithm doesn't even require that that polyline is flat. So if I take this polyline and I now mess with the control points and I drag this one off plane, and I drag this one off plane, and I drag this one off plane, and I have this volumetric sort of polyline, you can see that I don't get the surface anymore because it's not planar, but I do get the polyline. All right. So I do get this polyline. It's just that you can see that each one of the segments is basically trying to be as horizontal as possible because we're using a perfect z vector for calculating the perpendicularity. So if I look, if I had a perfect frontal view, you can see that each one of the lines is trying to kind of stick to the perpendicularity, the horizontality of the z vector, combined with the slope of each one of the segments, which I find kind of cool. All right. So I really like doing these things because you never know. I really like challenging algorithms, basically, and messing with what they're supposed to do by default. All right. So I guess with this, I would like to wrap up this first part of the tutorial of the algorithmic modeling challenge, where we have modeled a Koch star. Let me do the Koch star again. Let me get the Koch star again. We have modeled a Koch snowflake using vanilla Grasshopper. Okay. So what I would like to do on the next video is I would like to mimic the exact same process, but using C# scripting within Grasshopper and explain the same algorithm writing row code. The interesting thing of that is going to be that because I'm going to be using regular code, I will have structures that would allow me to perform iteration, and therefore I would be able to control how many levels of depth in the subdivision I can do just with one single slider. Okay, so if you're interested in learning how to do that, please continue with the second part of this video, which should pop up. A link to that should pop up somewhere here as a window, etc., etc. Okay. But if you're not interested in that anymore, thank you for watching this video, and please feel free to subscribe, like this video, turn on notifications, etc., etc. Okay. See you on the next video, hopefully. Alrighty. All right, Grasshopper tutorials. Did you like how I explained it? Because it sucked, right? It's unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't really know. The way Grasshopper works doesn't really allow you to do these kind of recursions. And again, as I just said, you can use plugins to bypass that limitation, but I'd rather implement that limitation, implement that recursiveness by typing code. Okay, so let me record now the intro to this video. Okay, and for that, I'm going to and should I go flat here again? Yes. Yeah. All right, and I'm going to do this for this video, and I need to lay back a little bit. Alrighty. All right, let's do this. Ho, ho, ho! Hello, my name is Jose Luis, and welcome to a new algorithmic modeling challenge where, because Christmas is approaching very soon, we're going to, wait, because Christmas is approaching very soon, we're going to do a couple videos on Christmas theme geometry. With the first one being, we're going to model a Koch snowflake or a Koch star, however you want to call that. And what does that look like? A Koch star is a subdivision, is a fractal subdivision algorithm that, given a geometry, for example, a triangle, divides that geometry recursively in a smaller triangle and a smaller triangle and a smaller triangle, etc., etc., creating this sort of like snowflakey geometry that has inspired me for this Christmas piece that we're doing. I'm going to be, what's interesting about this algorithm is that you can apply it to perfect equilateral triangles and it creates this nice snowflake form, but you don't really need to bound yourself to perfect triangles. You can apply that algorithm identically to any kind of polyline, and then that subdivision rule still applies the same, which I think is super interesting. All right. Now, the way I'm going to do this is that I'm going to implement this geometry algorithm in two different ways. First, I'm going to be using vanilla Grasshopper. So I'm going to be using just out-of-the-box components inside of Grasshopper and Rhino, which are a 3D modeling environment that has a parametric visual programming language that is very popular among computational designers. But then, because this model, Grasshopper, has limitations about how you can do recursion, in order to do that recursion, I end up needing to just basically copy-paste the whole thing 4 times to do 4 subdivisions. So in this first part of this video, I'm going to be implementing this in vanilla Grasshopper, but then in the second part, I will take the same logic and the same algorithms, and I will implement them using a C# scripting component inside of Grasshopper as well, which will allow me to do this recursion and control how many levels of depth I want to subdivide the curve in a programmatic way. Okay, so if you're interested in pure Grasshopper, you probably want to check out this video. But if you're interested more in C# scripting, you probably want to check out the second one. I will be explaining the logics of the subdivision in this one. And I may repeat it or not for the second one, but if you want to learn how to actually do this and what the Koch snowflake is, stick around to this one and then you can jump onto the second one. All right? All right, let's get busy. Ho, ho, ho. All right. Could you hear the bells? No, no. Wait, so I have to, you can hear the bells, right? Uh, what if I, no. What if I turn off, hmm. Oh, what about now? Can you hear them now? All right, yeah, I think the noise reduction that I have, I think the noise reduction, yeah, it's just killing the. All right, okay, so now noise reduction is on again. All right, let me do this one thing. I want to take a screenshot. All right. Okay, so ready for part two? Alrighty, so we're going to be ready for part two. Okay, in part two, what are we going to do? We're going to take the curve. We're just going to bring it here. Disconnect, wire display, hidden, yes. We're just going to move all the way here. All right. And I'm going to turn this off. Actually, why just... Okay. All right. So this is going to be poly, and this is going to be levels, for example, and one of them is going to be a polyline. The other one is going to be an integer, and yep. And I will record the introduction. I will record the introduction later on. All right, so let's try to get this one ready. So what are we doing here? We're doing the same algorithm, Koch subdivision, but we are doing it instead of manually, and we're going to, instead of with Grasshopper, we're doing C#, which means the subdivision algorithm might be a little different at this point, but I can explain that. And I want to start the video by referring to the previous one, where I explained the algorithm. So I want to start the video by saying like, hey, we explained how to do this in the previous video, but we basically do I want to go over this again? I may just want to say real quick. I may just want to explain it real quick. And after that, we start implementing. Okay. A quick refresher, if you are not coming from the previous video where I did this in vanilla Grasshopper, I just want to remind you that the way that we're going to do this is we have a polyline, and then that polyline is basically a sequence of points. So any triangle can be thought of 4 points, 0, 1, 2, and 3, which is the same point as the beginning, so that the polyline closes up. And then what we're going to do is we're going to subdivide each one of those segments into 3 segments and find the 2 points in the middle at 1/3 and 2/3. We're also going to find another point at the center, and we're going to move it perpendicular to the segment so that we can find that third point that makes the pin of the triangle off the curve, right? And we're going to move it a distance that is going to be equal to the side of the smaller triangle we're subdividing times square root of 3 divided by 2, which is the height of an equilateral triangle. And once we have that, we can then do a little bit of like smart order manipulation and put all the points in the right order so that when we join them with a polyline, we get this element here. We get like the full subdivision polyline. Another reminder is that the way we're going to find these perpendicular vectors is by using the cross product of a vector that joins the 2 points of the segment we're working with a vector that is perpendicular to the plane where the polyline lies. And remember that the cross product of 2 vectors is a perpendicular vector. So that's why this is going to be the way we're going to find those perpendicular vectors. I have explained all this thing in a bit more detail in the previous video. So if you have questions or if this process is not clear, please go back to the previous video where I explained this process a little better. Okay? So what we're going to do now is we're going to implement all this logic. The idea of taking a polyline as pairs of points, and for each pair of points, generate an algorithm that finds the intermediate points, at 1/3, the one that is perpendicularly moved and the one at 2/3, and then put them together in a list in order to generate a polyline. We're going to do that manually, and we're going to do that by writing recursive algorithms. Okay, so let's take a look at how we can implement that. I'm going to take. Can I take a 1-minute break? I'm taking a 1-minute break. I'll be right back. Wait. I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. Okay, let's get busy. Right, and so we are here. I just created a triangle in Rhino, and then I'm going to I just brought that triangle into Grasshopper by creating an empty curve component and setting it to this triangle. And then I have created this C# script component here that I have where I have renamed the first input to Polyline, and I'm going to right click here and make sure that the type of that input is going to be, it's overflowing on my other screen, that the type of the input is going to be Polyline here. And then the second is going to be levels, which is going to be an integer, because I want to know how many levels of recursion and subdivision I want to do. So I'm going to plug those two here. And then at this point, I think I'm ready to start writing some code here. And the first thing that I'm going to do, and I'm going to rename the output, I'm going to rename it Koch, for example. So now that I'm here, the first thing that I would like to do is, I think you know me already, and you know that I like being very functional about how I write my algorithms, so that then I can copy paste code around my different programs. So the way I'm going to do this is I am going to first, we're going to implement the idea of taking a polyline, so the full triangle, and then subdividing each one of the sides of that triangle and creating one iteration of the Koch subdivision. So I'm going to focus first on taking the full polyline and creating a second polyline that has all the subdivision. And then once we have that working as a function, I will focus on I will create another function that will be like a superset of that, in a way, which is going to take any polyline and start applying this process over and then again many levels of depth. So I'm going to subdivide this process in those two different ways. So the first thing that I would like to do then is I'm going to create a function that is going to take a polyline and is going to apply that subdivision and is going to return another polyline with the Koch subdivision. Okay, so I'm going to call that Koch subdivision, for example. This algorithm is going to take a polyline as an input, so Pol, for example, and it's going to return another polyline object. Okay, so I take a polyline, I subdivide it, and I return that polyline. And then, to make sure that this works, what I'm going to do is, just for the sake of development, while I'm developing this algorithm, I'm just simply going to take whatever polyline is given to me and subdivide it with this algorithm. So I'm just going to subdivide it once. And then this, so that it works right now, I'm just going to return the simple algorithm first. And you can see that this is working and that I have no errors here. And if I plug a geometry output here, I do get the simple polyline that I still haven't modified whatsoever. Okay, so this is working right now, more or less. So now here, I need to write an algorithm that takes this polyline and subdivides that polyline. All right. So first, one thing that I probably want to do is I want to make sure that I know how many points are in my polyline. Okay, because yeah, I'm working with a triangle, but maybe the user is giving me a polyline that is not a triangle, that is a quad, or is that a more complex thing. So my algorithm will depend on how many points there are in my polyline. So I'm going to say I'm going to create a variable called point count, which is going to be equal to pol dot and the count property of polylines. This is very specific to Rhino Common. Okay. And then what I would like to do is I'm going to start a new empty polyline. And to this new empty polyline, the one that I will eventually be returning, I'm going to start adding strategically all these points that I'm going to be generating. So I'm going to create another polyline. I'm going to call this sub, and this is going to be a new empty polyline with nothing on it. All right. New empty polyline. And just for starters, what I'm going to do is, because I'm going to write an algorithm that is going to look at each one of these segments, the first segment, the second segment, and the third segment, I'm going to kickstart this algorithm by adding the first point, this one here, by adding it so that every time I look at a segment, what I do is I generate these 3 points here, And then when I look at the next segment, I generate these 3 points here. And when I look at the next segment, I generate these 3 points here. Therefore, there is no redundancy. There is no overlapping. There is no duality. So there are no points that overlap with each other, except for the last one, which has to overlap so that this polyline is closed. But this makes the algorithm a little cleaner. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to say, well, to this to the polyline that I just created that is empty, I'm going to add the first point. And the first point is going to be, oh, sorry, my keyboard does strange things these days. To this polyline, I'm going to add, from the polyline, I'm going to add the first point of that polyline, which I can find with the first property of polylines inside of Rhino. If I do that, and if I now, instead of returning the original polyline, I return this subdividing one, then what I get is that I have nothing because I have a polyline with only 1 point. So it gives me an error, which is okay. All right, this is fine. All right, so what I want to do now is I want to write an algorithm that goes over each one of the pairs of points, so 0 and 1, 1 and 2, and 2 and 3, for each one of the segments of my polyline. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a for loop. So, and if I have 4 points, I'm going to iterate 3 times because I have 3 segments. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a for loop, and I'm going to start that for loop with the value of 1. So that, because I've already looked at point 0 on my, can you see my cursor here? Because I've already looked at point 0 here. Now I'm going to start looking at point 1, point 2, and point 3 as the meaningful points for each one of the segments that I'm going to be working with. So I'm going to go back and say I'm going to start with point 1. I is going to have to be less than how many points are in my polyline, and I'm going to increase by 1 unit on every for loop. So here I'm going to iterate over each segment of the polyline. For each segment of the polyline, first I'm going to cherry pick the starting point and the end point of those segments. And remember, if I go back here and I say, well, I'm going to start with point 1 as the representative for this segment here. So therefore, the starting point of this segment is going to be the index, so 1 minus 1. So it's going to be 0. And then the end point is going to be this one here. So the way I can do that is I can say, I'm going to move this out of my head, and I'm going to say point 3D, the starting point is going to be equal to the points in the polyline, I minus 1. Let me explain what I've done. The polyline class in Rhino Common allows you to use the square bracket notation as if it was a list or if it was an array to retrieve the points that are part of this polyline. Because again, and you've heard me say this like 1,000 times, polylines are just simply lists of points. So it makes sense that you can use the list access notation, so square brackets, for example, to just cherry pick those points. So the start point is going to be whatever point we have at position I minus 1. And the end point is going to be the point that we actually have at position Y. So that's why if we do 1, 2, 3, we have 0, 1, 1, 2, and 2, 3. Alrighty. Okay, so the next thing that I would like to do is I would like to add to this polyline. So for each segment, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add this point here. The point that is at 1/3 of the length of that segment. How are we going to do that? Well, I'm going to use some code that I wrote for a previous geometry gem in which we found a point between 2 points that was at a relative distance. Okay, so that was actually in geometry gem number 7. And if you're interested in learning how that works, just feel free to go to this link to the geometry gen number 7 and figure that out. But basically, we wrote a function that given 2 points and a relative length from 0 to 1 between those 2 points, it gave us the point that was at that length. So what that means is that I can create a new point here, and I'm going to call that point 1/3, for example. And that point 1/3 is going to be a point that is going to be at a relative length between my start and my end point that is going to be at a third of that length. So I could type here 0.3333, or I could type here 1 divided by 3.0. And I want to highlight how I'm doing 3.0 to make sure that this division is not an integer division, but it's a division with decimal part. All right? So I have that, and now that I have this, I can add that point at 1/3 to my polyline. And if I run this code, I should start already getting stuff, all right, which is cool. So I have a polyline that goes where? So it goes from my first point, the one that I added manually, to the 1/3, the one at the 1/3, and the one at the 1/3. Okay, so something is already working here. All right, so I'm going to get here get endpoints of this segment, and then compute first third point. Now the next thing that I would like to do is I would like to find this point here. I would like to find the point that is offset from the axis by a particular distance. Okay, this is going to be the one that is going to be a bit more complicated, but it's not going to be that difficult anyway. So what we're going to do is, if you remember from the previous video, what we did is we calculated the vector that was the axis of this segment. We unitized it, and then we did a vector multiplication. We did a cross product with a vector that was perpendicular to the plane of this polyline. And because we were doing the cross product, because the cross product gave us the vector that was perpendicular to these two. So that vector that I'm trying to find here. Okay, so that you can go to the previous video to see a bit more visual way of how this happened. So we're going to compute the point at the tip of the subdivision. So what we're going to do first is we're going to calculate the axis vector. So vector 3D axis is going to be equal to a vector that goes from the starting point of the segment to the end point of the segment. So that is in Rhino Common, that's very easy to do. You can just subtract the end point from the starting point and you get that vector. Now, the second vector that we're going to use is we're going to find a perpendicular vector. All right, the vector that is perpendicular to this polyline. Right now, for the sake of getting an early version of this working, I'm just going to hard code that the perpendicular vector needs to be the z-axis. All right, but we will play a little bit with that later on. So I'm just going to hard code the fact that that vector has to be the z-axis, the world z-axis. All right, therefore, as I do that, actually, let me call this normal, for example. As I do that, then the perpendicular vector to this line is going to be the cross product of these two vectors. So I can do that in Rhino Common by saying vector cross product, and then the first vector is going to be the axis, and the second vector is going to be the normal. All right. However, I have forgotten one thing, which is that the axis needs to be normalized, because I want all the vectors that I'm working, I want them to be unit length, so that when I scale them up or down, I can control their length perfectly. So I forgot to say that axis, I want to unitize this vector. And because this vector is now unit, and this vector by definition from Rhino Common is also unit, I know that the perpendicular vector is also going to be an unit vector. All right? All right. So now what I need to do is I need to take this perpendicular vector, all right, this one that I created here, that right now is unit length, and I need to scale that up in a way that makes sense with the size of this triangle. So what I need to do is I need to find the length of this small triangle and multiply it by the square root of 3 divided by 2. How am I going to do that? Well, first of all, I need to find the length of this segment. All right? And this is something that we already did also in a previous geometry gem, in geometry gem number 2. We wrote an algorithm that calculates the distance between 2 points. And this is very simple Pythagorean algorithm. If you want to learn how this works, you're welcome to check that geometry gem. So what we're going to do here is, first of all, we're going to calculate A is going to be equal to the distance between the starting point and the end point. All right? Then we're going to calculate a third of that. So that's going to be A divided by 3.0. And then we're going to calculate height. So the hypothetical height of this triangle, which is going to be A3 times square root of 3 divided by 2. So this is going to be equal to A3 times math dot square root of the value of 3 divided by 2.0. All right? Okay, so I think we are ready to scale up this perpendicular vector by this amount. So the way we can do that is by saying that this perpendicular vector should be scaled up by a factor of h. And because perpendicular is unit, we know that now the result of this operation will be a vector with the exact length of h. If your system that you're working with, we can do this increment with a scalar on a vector class in Rhino Common because it has this operator overrides. But if you don't have that possibility, maybe you have something like, do we have scale? No. Do we have length computes? This only computes the length. So I don't know, maybe your system has a way of scaling vectors. I'm not sure, but this could also be, for us, it could also be the same as saying vector perp is going to be equal to itself multiplied by this height. All right? Okay, so we are good. Now the next thing that we need to do is we need to find this point here at the middle, and given this point, and we need to move that point by the perpendicular vector that we just generated. So that is going to be very simple given all the code that we already have. So I'm going to create vector 3D. The point in the middle is going to be a point that is going to be point along the line relative, like we just did before. And then it's going to be start, it's going to be end, and it's going to be a point at a distance 0.5. All right? And as if I have this, then what I can do is now I can say to that point, I want to add the perpendicular vector. So whatever that point was before, move it by that perpendicular vector that I just calculated. And at that point, the point is already at this location that we just generated. So this point is already here. So I can now go ahead and say to my subdivisions, I want to add this middle point that I just created. And let's see if this works. No, we have an error. What is going on here? So we cannot convert from point 2D to in line 92. Okay, so, so sorry. So this should be a point 3D object. All right, yes. So my bad. Okay, so it looks like this is somehow working. We have a polyline that starts here, goes to the first third, goes to the tip, and then jumps here, then goes here, and then jumps here, and goes here. So let me, how do I get the points of a polyline? No, there was a function. Let me, hold on. Yes, so I want to take this polyline and I want to see the control points of the polyline, which is basically the vertices, because I want to make sure that I am getting all, yes, so you see 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, so we're already there. We're getting very close, okay? Wonderful. The next thing that I need to do is to my algorithm, I need to add the point that is here, the point that is here, and the point that is here. The point that is at 2/3 of the length of each one of the segments. So that's going to be super easy given what we've done already. So we're going to compute the second third point, and that's going to be, I'm just going to copy paste this, and I'm going to say 0.23 is going to be a point relative from start to end at 2/3, and then I'm going to add 0.23 to that. If I run this, you can see that now this point is already showing up, all right? And then finally add the endpoint. So sub.add the endpoint so that we get this point into the mix, this point into the mix, and this one so that the polyline closes properly. As I do that, boom, we got this. Yoo-hoo-hoo! So let's recap a little bit what we've done. We have created this function that takes a polyline, all right? And given any polyline, it performs Koch subdivision and returns another polyline that has this, that is based on the original one, but it has all this subdivision with these triangles, all right? So this in itself is already a very neat function that can work on any polyline, all right? But now the trick is we want to write something that makes this function call itself over and over again recursively on the same polyline so that we can start creating more and more subdivisions. All right, let's take a look at how would we do that. How did that go? Was that intelligible? Was that not? Was it too much? Too little? Oh, I'm a little tired. Oh, yeah. So I think I was being optimistic, and I thought I was going to be able to do the two things this morning, but no. It looks like we're going to be using this afternoon's live stream. Okay. Alrighty. So I think this was the complicated part. So, yeah, so let's now just write the function, create Koch subdivision, create a polyline that has been performed for example. All right. The way we're going to do this is going to be very similar to what we did before, and it's going to be fairly easy actually. Just like we created a function to perform the one subdivision, what I would like to do now is I would like to create a function that I'm going to call the Koch star or the Koch snowflake or whatever, that is going to take as an input, it's going to take a polyline, right? And it's going to take the amount of levels that we want to subdivide that polyline in, and it's going to return another polyline where the Koch subdivision, the recursive Koch subdivision, has been applied to. All right, so the input is going to be a polyline and the return is also going to be another polyline. Now, what we can do is basically very similar to what we did in vanilla Grasshopper. What you basically see is that we did really apply the same algorithm, the same subdivision to the output of one component. We used it as the input for the next iteration of the subdivision. And the output of that subdivision, we used it as the input of the next subdivision. So here, we're going to use a very similar procedure where the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new polyline that I'm going to call the star. And that star is going to star, that star is going to start, that star is going to start, yes, it's going to start as a copy of the polyline that is going to be given to me, like the baseline, the triangle, all right? And then what I need to do is I need to write a for loop where these many times we're going to take the start and we're going to subdivide it with Koch subdivision. How does that work? I'm going to just write a simple for loop, but I'm saying I'm going to start at 0, I is going to be less than levels, so that we only iterate those many times, all right? And then I'm going to write something here. And now that I'm remembering, I'm just going to crank this down to 2 because you will see that 10 is actually a lot of levels. So I'm going to just crank that down. And then here, what I'm going to say is for each one of my levels of subdivision, what I want to do is I want to perform Koch subdivision to the polyline that I already have. So I want to perform Koch subdivision over the star polyline. All right. But what am I going to do now? Well, this function is going to return a polyline that has been applied this subdivision. The interesting thing is that what I can do is I can say, well, the result of that, I want to actually make it star. Because what I want to do is I want to say over and over, the result of the first subdivision is what I want the star to become, so that on the next iteration, that is what gets subdivided again as a second level, and the result of that is the star that I want to pass on to the third iteration of the for loop, gets subdivided, etc., etc. So basically, I'm taking what I had before, I'm subdividing it, and I'm using it as the input that gets sent to the next iteration of the for loop, and therefore it gets subdivided again. The way to do that is by taking the result of that and overriding the previous result that I had, so that the star starts becoming more and more complex over and over. And then finally, the result of that is what I'm going to return with this function. So you can see, like, I just finished this. Wait, and let's. Is this going to work? Wait. Like 3 levels. No, it's not working. Oh no, that was a. Oh yes, yeah, sorry. That was lame. Because I didn't change the code on the main component, which is still using simple Koch subdivision. So what I want to do is I want to change this to the full Koch star subdivision and then pass in here levels. And as I click start, whoa, we got 2 subdivisions, 3 subdivisions, 4 subdivisions. Let me turn this off here. 5 subdivisions, 6 subdivisions, and let me crank this all the way up to 10. At which point my computer, you see, it took half a second to compute, and it's actually not rendering, but that's only because the density of the geometry is so much that it only starts rendering when I zoom in. And you can see how my computer is getting laggy, but you can also see how I'm zooming in and zooming in, and it looks like there's like infinite of this thing. You know, I can still keep zooming in. You know how much subdivision have we done here? Woohoo! You know, and then we're getting to the 10th level. All right. How awesome is this? It's like fractal geometry. Let me crank this down a little bit because 5 is too much. And you see, like now, alrighty. Okay, so let me recap. What we have just written is basically a very simple function that takes the starting polyline and performs Koch subdivision over it this many times and overwrites the previous result. And that's why we are generating over and over more and more subdivision over the same original polyline. Okay? All right. So as I showed in my previous example, you can see that this can be applied to a triangle, and I'm just going to fill this in with a boundary surface, which is going to be a super expensive operation because of all this detail, and my computer is actually frozen right now. Whoa! Yes, you see, this took 12 seconds to compute. Not cool. All right, I'm going to remove that, and then, but you can apply that to any polyline, because there's nothing really in our algorithm that tells us that the input has to be a perfect triangle. Nothing like that, because we have worked at the level of each one of the single segments. We can apply this to any polyline. And also, as I described before, it doesn't really have to be a planar polyline. This I can apply it to a spatial polyline, and then you can see that the subdivision is just because I've been using a perpendicular C. The subdivision is just trying to stay as horizontal as possible, respecting the slope of the curve. All right. Now, there are things that I could do to modify this. So for example, here we hard-coded the fact that the normal vector is the z-axis. So we could pass in that as an input, for example. So let's say I wanted to hard-code here. What is the normal? What is the normal that I'm going to be using for these calculations? And this is going to be a vector 3D, okay? And then I'm going to pass here a z vector, which is with unit -1. All right. And then what I'm going to do this is I'm going to introduce this normal into the algorithms. So here I'm going to accept that this should have another input that is called the normal. All right. And then I'm going to accept that, make that this has to be another input that is going to be the normal. And this is the normal that I will be using here instead of the hard-coded z-axis. So I'm going to accept that. And then here, I'm also going to pass in the normal value. And here, I'm going to pass in the normal value. And whoop. And if I do that, you're going to see that now the Koch curve is going to flip and it's going to become inverted and it's going to be an anti-snowflake or something like that. That's what I read in Wikipedia. But you see, now it's inverted and it goes inwards. I kind of like it better here. All right. And I think this can use a boundary. Oh, well, I'm just going to crack this down a little bit. Yes, so we can do a surface. Oh, I cannot do a boundary surface here? Planar surface routine. Because it's not planar. All right, so yeah, it has to be planar to give me a... All right, but I think this is pretty cool. This could be a really nice cutout for a laser cut, huh? Yeah. Alrighty, so I'm going to go back to a normal. I'm going to go back to a normal Koch star, and I'm going to do 7 subdivisions here. Which, oh no, the surface component. Oh my god, this is gonna take forever to render. Okay, so I think I just broke my computer. So with this, I think I'm going to close up the video. This was Koch star, Christmas, whatever, snowflakes, fractal geometry. I hope you like this video, and if you like the work that we do here at Parametric Camp, please feel free to subscribe, to like these videos, to tell your friends. My name is Jose Luis. If you're watching this right before Christmas, I want to wish you a happy holiday. If you're watching this in the future, I also want to wish you a happy holiday anyway, because why not? All right. Thanks a lot, and if you're interested in more of this, I'm about to record a new geometry, a new algorithmic modeling, which is going to be a Sierpinski tree, which is another form of fractal geometry, okay? So you should be getting some links somewhere here, up or down or somewhere. But in the meantime, thanks a lot for being here, and you can see that this still hasn't, it still hasn't finished calculating, it's still frozen, all right? So yeah, so no 7 subdivisions. Be careful with the boundary surface component. It's very heavy apparently. Thanks a lot and have a good one. All right, and the intro video, because I always forget. Let's do the intro video and then we can have a few minutes for Q&A, and then after Q&A, I'm going to take a break, have lunch, and then we're going to be back at 2 p.m. where we're going to be doing a very similar thing, but it's going to be based on Sierpinski trees, which is also really cool and a lot of fun. All right. Alrighty. And that is if my computer... Oh man, am I gonna lose all this code? Oh, my computer is still not back. Where's my computer? Oh my god. I think it's I think I broke it. I don't want to lose the file. No. Oh god. This sucks. Yeah, you see, I got excited. And then I'm asking too much from my computer. God damn it. How's everyone doing? Maybe we can do Q&A while my computer goes back to responsiveness. Oh, thank you, thank you. Yeah, Monique, if you cut it out and you put it on your Christmas tree, I want to see a picture of that, please. So can you please share that on the Discord? That would be lovely. Thank you. So I do have a lot of RAM. It's just that because this process is CPU based, it can only do so much, you know? So I'm just gonna have to wait to see if this goes responsive again. Otherwise, I may just have to restart Rhino and see if there's any backup copy of this. Yeah, because it's still not responsive. That sucks. No, there's no autosaves. No. And I didn't save anything. No. I don't want to have to write this again. Okay, are we all okay with giving my computer a few minutes? Because I really, really don't want to have to do this again. And I don't have any autosaves, apparently. Ah, God. This sucks. Uh, mm. All right, Monique. Yes, whenever you want to post questions, like just go to the Discord and we can figure that out. Yeah, this is just, it's dead. No. Hmm. Oh man, this sucks. Ah, no. And I see my process. Rhino is taking up 16 gigabytes. Can you guys see? You see, Rhino is taking up 16 gigabytes to compute this of RAM. Let's do Q&A, then leave for lunch. People, yeah, maybe we can just leave for lunch and then I can record the introduction afterwards. Okay, that's a good idea. Let's just leave it calculating, see if it ever comes back, and then we can do the introduction. I can record the introduction in the afternoon. All right. Any questions, comments, concerns? Anything you would like to talk about? Otherwise, I think Monique has a good idea. If anybody did this or anybody followed this video and did the Grasshopper part and did the C# part, I will be very happy to have it, to have someone contribute and those files back to the system. Alrighty. Abdo, what about Rhino Compute? Yeah, what about it? What about it? What do I think about it? I think it's great. I think it's a really, really cool initiative. I still haven't had the time to try it out myself. I haven't worked or I haven't like injected it into anything, but I think it's really, really cool. And I think it's definitely going to be a game changer. I see a lot of my friends and people that I follow have been using it already and plugging it into other softwares, etc. It's a really, really nice initiative. So I'm really hoping to give it a try at some point soon. Alrighty. So if I think with that we can probably call it a morning. Thoughts on Rhino 7 and the new Grasshopper components, like using Grasshopper inside Rhino without opening Rhino? Hmm? Can you use Grasshopper in Rhino without opening Rhino? I didn't know. I did not know. I just downloaded Rhino 7. I haven't really used it. I'm still using Rhino 6, but I want to transition at some point soon. I think it hasn't been officially released, right? It's just a beta or something like that. I'm not entirely sure. But I didn't know. I didn't know there. I didn't know you could use Rhino. I didn't know you could use Grasshopper in Rhino without you opening Grasshopper. But that's an interesting feature. That could be cool. All right. So I'm going to take a break, go for lunch. We will be starting again at 2 p.m. and I'm going to be recording the introduction of what I just did and recording another geometry, another algorithmic modeling challenge, which is going to be the Sierpinski tree. So we're going to write something very similar to what we just did right now, but it's going to be for this kind of fractal geometry, Sierpinski tree, because it looks like a Christmas tree, right? So that's what we're going to do. Well, thank you very much for being here, and I'll see you in 1 hour and 45 minutes. Thanks a lot. Bye.